Welcome to the Parenting in the Digital Age podcast. Many parents are concerned that their child might be falling behind. Others are just looking for ways to help their children thrive, not just in the classroom, but socially, and well into their future careers. Each episode, we explore the challenges facing parents in the modern world, from behavior, education, and nutrition to device and gaming addiction. We interview a range of leaders in the area of childhood development to help you successfully navigate parenting in the digital age. Here is your host, Jamie Buttigieg.
Welcome to Parenting in the Digital Age, the podcast that explores the unique challenges and opportunities of raising children in today's tech-driven world. In each episode, we dive into insightful conversations with experts and thought leaders to provide practical guidance for navigating the digital landscape and life as parents. Today we have a very special guest who is not only well versed in psychology, but is also a keen observer of the geek culture and intellectual pursuits. Briton Kolber has been in private practice since 2012, specialising in geek-centered therapy. As someone who has spent a lifetime understanding the complexities of human behaviour, Briton brings a unique perspective on mental well-being, especially for those who identify with geek culture. Briton has also written a book. It's called Not Fishy Enough, a ridiculous parable about finding worth through self-acceptance. And this captivating read not only takes you on an adventure of aquatic proportions, but it also comes with a commentary, self-help and discussion section designed to dive deeper into themes like self-worth, social pressure and critical thinking, providing actionable guidance for both you and your kids. It's ideal for children aged 8 to 12. In today's episode, Briton will help us explore how the digital age is affecting our children's mental health, how specialised therapy like geek-centered therapy can offer unique advantages, and how we as parents can better understand and support our children in this fast-paced, tech-savvy world. So buckle up as we embark on this insightful journey with Briton Kolber. Briton, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. Please share with our listeners in your own words what you do and what you are passionate about.
I am a therapist and an author, and what I'm really passionate about is, well, among many things, it's about taking difficult to understand ideas in psychology and making them as simple as possible. So I like to use metaphors to take something that might take, a few weeks to learn or master and try to make it as simple as possible so someone can see like, oh, that, I can use that.
I like that a lot. Now much of our discussion today is going to revolve around the concepts in your book.
Thank you.
So perhaps you can give our listeners a bit of a synopsis about your book, Not Fishy Enough, a ridiculous parable about finding worth through self-acceptance.
Sure. Well, let's see, with spoilers or without spoilers?
Maybe without spoilers for the moment.
Okay, so it is about necessary spoiler. It's about, this guy is a crab that he was adopted by fish and living in an isolated tide pool. So without any other crabs as an example around, he just thinks he's an incompetent fish. And so when he starts to compare himself to others, he has to eat with his fins, and that's just unfishy, and he can't swim properly. He starts running into problems in daily life. And so then he starts to discover things in his environment that are different enough to make him start questioning, well, what if I'm not a fish? What if I'm something else? And that is really similar to a lot of the things people, my kids have experienced, things my clients have experienced and talked to me about as a psychotherapist. How can I possibly accept myself if I'm different? Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And Briton, we get a lot of authors on the show, all of whom make a remarkable impact in the world. But I'm going to go so far as to say your book should be required reading in schools. And I don't know if you've heard that before. Maybe you have.
It's a bold move, sure.
And look, I think it should be a cartoon. I think it should be a case study. The discussion, your book has a section towards the end that has discussion points and questions, and they're thought-provoking, and they're conversations that parents and kids should be having, even teachers and parents, and teachers and kids and educators.
Right.
So maybe, I don't know, let's talk about social pressure and expectations, a theme in the book. Maybe you can shed some light on how parents can perhaps equip their kids to navigate social expectations, especially in this world of social media.
That's an excruciatingly good question. So social expectations seem to have gotten bigger. I mean, there are people that have studied this in more detail than I. But the social pressure is exacerbated, of course, by the vivid comparisons on social media. You know, a girl is 10 years old and starts to, be more self-aware and looks at, well, my body doesn't look like that. Something must be wrong with me. So there's this extra pressure. But in all sides, I'm not the right gender. I don't look manly enough. I don't look female enough. I don't look strong enough. Whatever that is, I'm not competent enough as an artist. Maybe I should just stop. So the way that I've understood this is I'm kind of extrapolating from Brené Brown's work, especially The Gifts of Imperfection and Daring Greatly. So she calls shame as the master emotion, right? And so shame is the master emotion. And the opposite, which is about worth, the opposite of that is, well, self-worth, and that's based on Krista Neff's work. Self-worth and self-acceptance is deciding, I'm okay. But how do you, deciding I'm okay doesn't mean giving up on aspiration. It doesn't mean giving up on standards. It just means a starting point of self-compassion. What if you're okay? What if you're worth love and belonging just the way you are, and then you can build from that? Well, that gives you a safe platform to build on. It gives you a bit more of a foundation to grow from. I can give you a specific example if I'm not nattering on too much. I was talking to my child. I hope he's okay with me saying this, but he was just recently telling me, like, hey, I've got, I had my shirt off, or you could see my back, and he's like, I've got back hair. He's 11. What do I do about that? And I do the same thing that is in the book. I even referenced the book because he helped me. He was part of my beta testing. Like, this is so funny. Does this work? Can you understand this? And we took the concept of liking yourself, and the thing about liking yourself is that you don't care as much about other people's opinions. Like ages ago, like our parents most likely grew up with expressions like sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, we've kind of pivoted culturally, at least in the US, to words do matter, and words are everything, and words provoke this anxiety, which must control the environment. We must say these are the right things to say, these are the right thoughts to think. Well, it gets a bit rigid. And so I think it's important to balance, to have care for the people, but also to balance it out with a sense of, how can I make this fun and playful and also safe enough to like me for the way I am? Because if you like yourself the way you are, you start developing this sense of safety internally and resilience. And this goes right with Steph Stephen Porges is saying about polyvagal theory and feeling safe in your body, safe enough to connect with other people. So I'm passionate about the subject. Let me know if I've rambled on too much or if you're tracking with what I'm saying.
Fantastic.
Okay. So one of my first examples of this is an old friend of mine has he can't hear in one ear, and the other ear has a hearing aid. So there's a lot of he grew up with a lot of self-conscious stuff, about I look like this and I can't always hear what's going on. I feel terrible and I'm missing the conversations. And my friends and I used something that I later learned was rough humor. So rough humor in various cultures is like the devil's work, and like that's evil. And in some cultures, it is like part of work, part of life, part of how you get along. and you help people accept themselves through a little kind ribbing. You poke them a little bit, and you're like, "Hey, are you okay, mate?" And what we did is we sort of, teased him a little bit about how we said things, and enough, but we're supportive enough in a way that he grew to be really resilient. Really just like, I'm okay. You can make a joke if you want to, but I'm okay. And that's kind of where I started learning, hey, there's a way to worry about what other people think and try to make sure everyone's nice. And there's another way to just help your kids and yourself feel strong and safe on the inside.
There's a lot to unpack there. So how as a parent do I help my child like themselves? Is it a matter of modeling and saying certain things about my own self? Is it does it come from the questions we ask, or a combination of those things?
Well, it's less about the specific things to do and more about the how. Like a feeling of safety comes from you. So if you feel safe within your own sense of self, and you can learn how to do that. There's self-work, there's the metta prayer, loving kindness, meditation, part of the Buddhist tradition. It's in certain meditation practices. Kristen Neff writes great things about self-compassion that in turn came from Buddhism. But if you have a practice of like gratitude and liking yourself, and if you go do Brene Brown's 3 ways to deal with shame, that's self-acceptance, mindfulness, and common humanity. I am also imperfect, and this person has something that they're working on. They're not quite ripe yet. They're not quite done yet with this, or they have a physical thing they're uncomfortable with. If you do those 3 things about dealing with shame and self-acceptance, then you can listen from a state of safety to your kids. Well, what's it like feeling that your belly's too big? What's it like feeling that you can't seem to concentrate in math class and all your other peers can? And then when you create a safe place for them emotionally to express, then in that safe context, they might learn that they can feel okay and not judged. And then again, it's less about steps after that and more sort of a co-creating this place of safety, play. Does that make sense? I mean, am I being too obscure with the metaphor?
No, not at all. So shame and feeling unworthy, does it manifest different in children than in adults?
Within adults, it's sort of cemented in. Like that was one of the reasons I started writing the book, was that I would run into someone, say, in their 30s, in their job, and they couldn't take a compliment. They couldn't, the promotion that they couldn't even try for the promotion because they didn't think they were good enough. So with adults, is a little bit more of a accretion of layers. A great way to describe this is, have you ever tried to draw something or sign your name on a piece of paper that is over a rough piece of wood or over some rough rock? No matter what you do, the past leaves a mark. It leaves an impact on what you're trying to do now. And so adults seem to have more accumulations. Children seem to be a little bit more flexible to, you're okay. But it still needs to be with listening first. It's my mentor, Amanda Franklin, used to say, it's only when we understand precisely how difficult their situation is, they are inclined to accept our influence. So it's really not a just like yourself, be fine, you're good. Doesn't work. Haven't seen it yet. But it's a process of, well, how is it? How terrible is it? And then when they show you a sense of, like with an exhale or release of tension in their shoulders, like, okay, you do get it. Just like Chris Voss says, and never split the difference. There's a kind of, yeah, that's right. But when they say that's right, that you get it, then you've got a bit of a window to say what you think is important. Do you have any questions on that? Does that make sense in your...
Yeah, no, it makes amazing sense.
Yeah.
You talk a bit about self-criticism as well, and
Sure.
critical thinking in your book.
Right.
So how can parents foster a balanced self-development or self-assessment
Right.
without tipping their children into excessive self-criticism?
Oh, I love that you brought that up. So I'm super passionate about this one because as I've been studying, so I haven't done as much lately, but improvisation is a thing that I've spent a lot of time with. And there's a lovely woman named Anne Mabry who pointed out while she was teaching classes in improvisation for a certain age range, there was a point where they were having playtime, and like this was just fun. They would do all kinds of crazy things. And then something would turn on and be like, oh, I can't do this. I'm too cool for this. Or I can't take that risk. And ever since then, it was fascinating. What's happening? And so there's apparently developmentally, around between age 8 and 12, there's a kind of self-consciousness that comes up. And at the same time, there's a kind of comparison. Well, comparison isn't bad. People like to say comparison is the thief of joy, but I think it's the starting point. So if we don't have comparison, this is not like this, I'm not like this, one of these things is not like the others, as in Sesame Street, there's no critical thinking. There's no, this is like that. The critical thinking is about numbers. There's no should. There's no not good enough. There's no unworthy. Critical thinking is, well, it's A or B, or it's yellow or black, or it's Pantone colors. Well, there's a specific number for each thing. That's critical thinking. But comparison can lead to critical thinking, and like, okay, I'm not running as fast as I want to. I can do things to run faster. Or I don't feel good when I eat. I'm a terrible person because I don't eat well. It's just like, I can change these things. But comparison can lead to also judgment, which is, well, you're just too fat. You need to change. Or, well, you're just not quite enough. Could you just be different? That's a shift that is more personal and feels gross. You might feel justified having a judgment. People love making judgments a lot because they feel strong. Well, that sucks. This is stupid. That guy's a loser. They feel a little sense of like, oh, I'm better. But it's kind of a trap. So if you can get out of the trap yourself, you can be an example to your children. And if you can start to think about the difference between critical thinking and judgment, it's a great tool to teach your children.
Certainly is.
Yeah.
You have this concept where you discuss a concept about doing the same thing harder or doing the same thing differently.
Yeah.
And that's intriguing. So maybe you could explain how parents might be able to guide their children in understanding when it's time to pivot and try a different approach sometimes in life.
Sure. That is a vexing question. Honestly, I don't know if I have a specific guideline, but I think it's great to just have the idea in mind, to be open to it. So, for example, if you keep trying the same thing over and over, it's hard to know, am I making progress? But I think in the very least, it's always worth curiosity. It's always worth sort of am I just doing more of the same thing, and it's kind of a definition of insanity? Or is there something else I can do? Like if someone is drawing and they're trying to shade a particular thing, or they're trying to get a particular thing right, if they keep doing the exact same thing over and over, they're probably going to get the same result. But it doesn't mean they have to give up. Right? So there's a kind of meaning of failure that's really important. Is failure feedback, or is it diagnosis? I can't play the trombone. I'm not a trombone playing person, or I haven't figured out yet how to do it. But chances are, if life has not given you the dexterity, or if you have a physical difficulty where you can't actually reach the trombone, you don't have the range to extend out, it might not make sense for you to continue to do the trombone unless you find a technology that can help you do it. Like Stephen Hawking, his decline from being like brilliant and productive, but all to later brilliant and productive, but having to find accommodations. Well, he could have tried doing the same thing over and over, or he tried, with help, I believe it was his wife at the time, I'm not sure, or an assistant. Like, well, what can we do that can help you keep doing what you want to do, but we'll try something else? Does that answer it? Maybe a bit.
Yeah, no, it does, Briton. That's a great answer. And speaking of trombone, let's talk about accepting hidden talents.
Oh, right.
So how can parents perhaps identify and nurture hidden talents in their children?
Well, the hidden talents come out when they're safe enough to be a little weird. There's you might find that they can do things. So, example, I wouldn't say that my parents were perfect, but in some ways they did just what I needed. So one of the things that I find particularly fun is almost nobody knows that I can imitate lots of different accents, and sometimes it's a bit offensive. I'm trying to say imitate an accent to someone's from that area. But sometimes when say one time I was visiting Northern Ireland, there was a time that was extremely entertaining to me, but nobody was offended when I imitated them. And like if you go to the South, there's different things you can say, but even that one, I got confused with it. It sounds like my Southern accent has a little bit of similar sounds, but it's a little bit different. So I would say that is a hidden talent. And the way to nurture a hidden talent is to just notice your children and see what lights them up, and see if that's something that you can nurture into something that they enjoy doing, and that maybe they can develop some practice and proficiency in. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, Briton. And parents need to be somewhat open and also accepting, not conforming to the view of others. Like a perfect example in our household is my son. He's 19. Got involved in live action role playing for parents. It's LARPing, right? Now this is something I would never do. It's something that my family would never conceive of. And at first I was a little taken back. And then I just thought, no, I'm going to embrace this. This may be his hidden talent. There may be some life pursuit in this, and And then I went and actually, I didn't get involved per se, but I went out and watched and tried to understand and see what the experience was about, and sort of running around on a battlefield and having a great time with friends, making connections, finding his tribe, and he was. Instead of having this sedentary lifestyle stuck to the gaming device, he was actually out in nature, and there was and I saw the immediate other benefits that were there when I had this level of acceptance, and so I encourage parents where possible to, as you said, be curious and try and notice what lights them up and finding those hidden talents. So, but that wasn't a bad Australian accent.
Oh, right.
I've got to say, and in Australia, like the US, we have many isolated communities. Right, there's many pockets of small towns.
Right, like if you're from Perth, you've got a different sound, right? And versus Brisbane and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think if you're in Adelaide, South Australia, you have a completely different accent, a little bit like the South, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Look, you do. I think in the book you explore this topic of growing up in a small town. Am I right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I think growing up in a small town is definitely different to growing up in the city in terms of social development. What advice would you give to parents, perhaps raising children in isolated communities?
Right. In isolated communities, there's cultivating a sense of safety at home, if you possibly can. I've talked to people that have grown up, for example, in Paris, Texas, which is the second largest parish in the world. Paris, Texas is a town of about, I think it's about 30,000 the last time I checked. And so the people that thrived there were either the ones who really liked it and, sort of felt part of the in-group, and the ones who found their own thing. They're like, okay, I'm okay being me. I'm okay at home. My parents are not anxious. My parents are not controlling and trying to make me be a particular way. Those people found a way to thrive. So again, there's a kind of, it's almost like working with a pandemic. There's a kind of, if you can't find a way to inoculate yourself against the criticism of others, it works to try to control your environment. But if you control your environment too much, it can be oppressive, it can be really restrictive, and people don't like it for long. So if you can find a way to feel a sense of safety, to inoculate yourself against the criticisms and the judgment of other people, you can do that wherever you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big topic, and even I struggle with that too.
Yeah.
One minute I'm like, I don't care what people think, and I'm going to go out and do this, and then next minute I walk into that room, and all of a sudden I do care what people think, and or at least I think I do.
Sure.
And so I struggle with that. Any tips for us adults who struggle with that?
Well, I think Roshi Joan Halifax has this wonderful meditation that I'm a fan of. So it's strong back, soft front. So strong back is, well, I'm living by my values. I know what my values are. I'm going to try and it's better if you do get in touch with, this is what I think is right. And then you can go from there to being open. So the soft front is you're open, without armor or some kind of, shielding. You're open to the experience of other people. But that doesn't mean it's useful for you to go into shame all of a sudden, or being extremely self-conscious and guarded and anxious. So it can happen. It's best to practice a little bit, being self-aware, being kind to yourself. So lots of iterative practicing is useful. So for example, for you, I would suggest something maybe similar to what I do, which is it's a regular practice. I believe it was Tara Brach that came up with this meditation thing called RAIN. It's basically an algorithm for how to be chill. So there's recognize what's happening in your body. There's allowing this discomfort. I'm uncomfortable in this moment. And then there's this investigation, which is your brain wants something to do. You try to get curious. Why am I uncomfortable here? What's different about this place versus where I was 10 minutes ago? Oh, well, the people are different. There's a different cluster of people. And then that's uncomfortable, so you want to nurture yourself a little bit. It could be listen to music, take a walk, take some deep breaths, give yourself a hug if no one's looking. There's a kind of predictable algorithm to take care of yourself so that you're fine, kind of no matter what, mostly. Does that seem useful, or is that too many steps?
Right, no, I like it. It is useful, and it's sometimes just to stop and recognise what's going on is often the missing piece, certainly for me. I get in this spiral of overthinking things, and
sure.
So I do like that.
Sure.
In your book, you discuss who we think we are and how it affects us.
Yeah.
And with children, now having online personas and maybe many online personas, how can parents help kids reconcile their online identity with their real self?
Well, their online identity may be an aspect of themselves. For example, there's some people that do therapeutic online role play. So I have some friends at Game to Grow that's based in Seattle. It used to be for-profit, then it's a non-profit, and they're thriving as far as I know, and some other offshoots of it. But one of the things that therapeutic Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing things do is they help people connect with another version of themselves. What if I were big and strong? What if I were more mischievous? What if I were funnier? And so people get to try on different ways of being, and according to their work, it seems really therapeutic. So it's rather than a sense of like this is an inauthentic self, it may be a more expansive sense of I'm more than this thing. I think people are have different roles with different people. With their friends, you may see a different side. With their teachers, you're going to see a different side. I think they're all this sort of cluster. And especially if you look into internal family systems, there's a whole bunch of us inside. It's kind of like the movie Inside Out, which came out a while ago. It's the same person, but there's different bits. So from those bits, maybe you can find a core self, that is more like, and again, you have to get out of autopilot. If you're in autopilot and just busy without time to yourself, you don't really know who the real you is. Yeah. So if you spend a little bit of time to yourself, drawing by yourself, or meditating, or just not being entertained or overscheduled with too many sports and too many activities, spend a little time just messing around, then you can start to discover what's really feels you, because your body changes a little bit. I mean, I see this in my child clients and my adult clients. Sometimes, they have all these multiplicity of bits, but sometimes they just, it's like sparks are coming out of their eyes. Something just lights up, and they feel really alive. So when you can see your kid sort of almost imperceptibly kind of sit a little taller, their eyes get brighter, I think it's great to pay attention. Like, what's that? That's cool. You really like making your friends laugh.
Yeah.
Or you really like building things. Like, it seems to me like you really like solving engineering problems. My oldest child, like, that's his thing. He's not always interested in socializing. I mean, he is. But really, when he gets to, take something apart and understand how to build something and then blow it up, of course, that's his thing.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think there's two sides to this. You've got the online personas that are reflecting parts of us, and you're right. You said something like, when I'm with my father, I'm slightly different to how I am with my wife, but I'm still me.
Yeah.
But I also think there's this unhealthy side of online personas, and I think that many people and coming into these pre-teens and teens, seeing the societal expectations online, and then modifying themselves in this online environment to portray a different version of themselves.
Sure.
And then not being able to live that in their daily lives.
Okay.
What does that create? Surely there's something, I don't understand the psychological side of this, but I think it's unhealthy.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. So I would say that is about the not just the multiplicity of identities, but rather the conformity, the inauthenticity, and that's kind of like emotional fusion. It's like, this affected me a lot. I've actually learned. I learned over time, and I'm mostly unlearning it, this sense of giving up some of my autonomy, my authenticity, in exchange for keeping the peace, in exchange for emotional safety. That's giving that up is when kids are with their friends saying, I love this video game. I love Minecraft. And they're like, you still play Minecraft? That's stupid. That's 15 years old. Whatever. And oh, well, giving that up is well, I guess I don't like Minecraft that much anymore. Maybe it's not that good. When you start to compromise what's actually important to you in order to fit in. In the Scandinavian culture has these things called the laws of Jante that I reference, where there's this sort of conformity which is really effective in some ways. You create a sort of monoculture of this is how you do it, this is how you fit in, you do these things, and you're safe. But that safety comes at a cost of who are you really? Japanese culture does a similar thing. There's an expression, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. That's a cost to the conformity. So when you're talking about this, being a different persona and giving up who they are, that's a very caustic sort of conformity that leaves scars. You feel safe and you fit in, but who you are is a sham over time.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing more and more of that not just in adults but in kids. We going to lighten it up a little bit, Briton.
Sure.
Fun question we like to ask our guests as we start to round off our chat today. If we had a time machine and Briton could go back to your 12-year-old self and give yourself just one piece of advice, what would that be for you?
Oh, right. One piece of advice. It would be less advice and more reassurance. Like, it's going to be mostly okay. You know, and part of that is going to be mostly okay, and pain is part of life, but suffering through it is optional. You know, you don't have to be miserable. You don't have to focus on everything that's wrong. Just try to focus on things that are right. Maybe that was too much, but I don't know.
That's tremendous. That's tremendous. And I'm
Sure.
going to take all these one day and put them into a book, and the things I learned from 100 podcast guests or something like that.
Oh, fantastic!
So, Briton, tell us, where can our listeners find the book? If you've got a child sort of between 8 and 12 or thereabouts, this is essential reading in my view. I'm not getting paid to say that, but I think this is an important book for any family. Not Fishy enough, a ridiculous parable about finding worth through self-acceptance. Where do I get it?
Well, if you just put in the title in your search engine, you will find it, and it'll be on, could be Barnes & Noble, could be bookshop.org, could be amazon.com. It's distributed by Ingram and Amazon, so chances are wherever you want to find it, you can, it'll be there online, you can order it, and some stores are carrying it.
Fantastic. And how can our listeners reach out and find you or connect with you on socials? What's the best place for them or best way for them to do that?
Sure. Well, Instagram, Psychology Metaphors, sort of ant symbol, Psychology Metaphors. But notfishenough.com is a great start. That has sort of everything, my social things are connected there.
Fantastic. We'll make sure that is in the show notes. Briton Kolber, thank you so much for your insightful deep dive into this wonderful topic today. I know that many of our listeners would have gained a lot from this. I know I certainly did. Thanks for your time and generosity, and hope we cross paths again in the future.
That'd be lovely. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
If you enjoyed the show, please connect with Jamie on LinkedIn or Instagram. You'll find links in the podcast description. Parenting in the Digital Age is sponsored by Skill Samurai, Coding and STEM Academy for Kids. Skill Samurai offers after-school coding classes and holiday programs to help kids thrive academically and socially while preparing them for the careers of the future. Visit skillsamurai.com.au.